Part 2 of our series Introductions, Conclusions, and Titles covers conclusions. So your conclusion also is a very important part of your essay. It needs to complete your essay, make sure that readers understand your purpose and your ideas, and restate your thesis, but in different words or from a fresh viewpoint. Make sure that your conclusion does not just summarize what you already said. You need to make sure that instead you are driving that point home. You are showing us why it is so important what you've just said. So here are 7 strategies that you can use in your conclusion to kind of help it be more memorable. Some of these are similar to your introductory strategy, some of these are different. One example is from specific to the general. So in this case, you're moving from your specific thesis to more general discussion of the world. Explain how your argument has a wider significance than what you've discussed. So for example, if you're talking about protecting children from violence in the media, then you might expand to the general need to protect children and children's importance to society to show why it's so important that we look at this particular incident. Another example is you can move from the general to the specific. So that's the more general example of your thesis to a more specific implementation. So this is again where you have a specific story or an example that indicates why your discussion is so important. Maybe you go back to the example that you used in your introduction if you went from the specific to the general in your introduction and reflect on that particular story. Maybe you introduce a story, but that's where you give a very specific example to kind of make your argument more memorable, make it seem more real. One thing you can do in your conclusion is to call for further research. So that's where you identify what's lacking in our ability to address the problem or understand it, and suggest how those gaps should be addressed. Make sure that research doesn't already exist, so you're not calling for something that's already done and therefore showing your ignorance on the subject. But in a lot of cases, there are things that we don't know, we haven't studied. Maybe we haven't been able to study them for a reason. Maybe it's just something that researchers have ignored. And you can point that out and say, we need more studies in this area. We need more understanding of this concept to really be able to address this subject. You can offer a solution or recommendation. So if you're making a mildly argumentative paper where you're talking using value words, so this is good, this is bad, etc., then you might be in the majority of your paper working on that value claim, and then in your conclusion suggest a few solutions to the problem. That's one option. Now we usually do a proposal paper where your whole paper is offering a solution or recommendation. So if you want to do that in the conclusion, what your strategy might be would be giving some very specific recommendations. What is the first step into enacting your proposal? And that can be really helpful because think about it, if someone just tells you do some general task, you might not know where to start, but if they give you a first step, that makes it much easier. I had a student before who said, contact your representatives about this, and they said, if you live in Bryan College Station, this is your representative, here's how to contact them. And that was great because that saves the reader the first step of trying to figure out who to contact, what method to use. They're like, here's an email address, send an email to this address. And that makes it really easy for the reader to take that first step. Remember that readers are lazy, so if you're trying to get people to do something, doing some of the work for them, like looking up representatives or looking up different things that they might have to otherwise look up, that can be helpful. Giving them a really small step to take, that can be really helpful. You can also use a quotation, so you can use a quotation in your introduction or your conclusion. You can use one in both. Don't reuse the same quotation unless you can reflect back on it and take on new meaning. So you don't want to simply repeat yourself, but you could use the same quotation if you have something new to say about it. Or you could just choose whether you want to put that quotation in your introduction or your conclusion. You could also use the question strategy. And this is different from the introduction because in the introduction you're asking the questions that led you to write your paper. But if you're using the question strategy in your conclusion, then you're asking rhetorical questions. So what you want to do is ask a question that your reader's going to answer and they're led to answer in the way you want. So this example says, how many people must suffer before we do something about it? You can ask questions like that. How many children must die before we enact new laws, or whatever you're looking at? And of course you want your reader to automatically answer the same as you believe. So, too many have suffered, too many children have died, any children dying is too many, something like that. And the idea is that if the reader answers that question for themselves, they're going to take more responsibility for acting on the issue and enacting your proposal that you want them to do. Lastly, is kind of a fun one, is speculation. So you might be guessing what happened or what might happen. Usually what you're doing when you're doing speculating is basically if you do what I want, here are the great things that could happen, or if we don't do what I'm asking you to do, here are some horrible things that could happen. You want to make sure that you don't go too extreme. So you don't want to say, oh, we need to prevent legalizing marijuana because if we do, then people are going to do harder drugs until everyone's on drugs and society collapses. Well, that's a little bit extreme. But you could paint a picture of a little bit of a nicer world or maybe a little bit of a worse world for your readers to feel that there are lasting repercussions for your proposal. So again, like in your introduction, you can combine several strategies. Maybe you have a great quotation of someone who's speculating. Maybe you are going from the general to the specific and using some example of need for further research. That's fine. If you need to put more than one in, certainly don't try to cram them all in, but you can use more than one if it works for you. No matter what, you want to remember that your conclusion needs to be strong and emphasize what is at stake. You don't want to have so much hyperbole that you seem sarcastic, but you do need to have lots of emphasis. So this is an example I use for some of my other presentations. If my thesis is about attending a community college, then just restating it like this: deciding to attend a community college can provide a wonderful learning environment while saving students money. That's not going to be that helpful. Too much, however, unless you want to throw your hard-earned cash down the toilet, you should go to a community college where you can get a world-class education for pennies. Notice how you can't get that much emphasis without breaking your tone, so this is not an academic tone, but it also sounds like a used car salesman, and you don't want to come off as sleazy. So maybe you could give some some emphasis without going too far. So here's my example of that. In this economy, few can afford the luxury of purchasing an education with a prestigious brand name, but luckily, community colleges can still give would-be college students a chance to achieve their goals with the same solid beginning as first and second year courses at four-year universities at a significantly reduced price. Notice I do have emphasis here. I have words like luxury and prestigious that are loaded words significantly. So I'm really emphasizing this, but also I'm not going too crazy. So I'm not making it sound too insane. Ask yourself, when you're thinking about what to use in your conclusion, can you relate your specific topic to a broader, more overreaching concern? You might want to go specific to general. Can you narrow your topic to a more specific example and relate more closely to your readers? Then you want to go general to specific. If the problem you address is ongoing and needs further investigation, use the further investigation strategy. If you need to discuss the feasibility of your proposal more thoroughly, or maybe you can give your readers a concrete, easy first step to follow to enact that proposal, then use the problem-solution strategy. If someone important said something memorable about the topic that you haven't already used, use the quotation strategy. Or if you could ask a hypothetical question that would lead your audience to action, then you want to use the question strategy. Last, think about whether you could speculate on the positive results that would occur from adopting your proposal or negative results that would result from not adopting your proposal, in which case you could use that speculation strategy. So here's a list of those concluding strategies again, and our third part of this lecture will be on titles.